Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in Kampala. That map is of Kampala, and you see there's a little highlight there of Mulago National Referral Hospital. It is very dear to me. I was born there. So every time I come to Kampala, I'm coming home. Technically, every time I renew my Kenya passport, they tell me, you're a Ugandan. Why do you want a Kenya passport? Because I was born here. So I'm happy to be back in Kampala or in Uganda as well. Now, I'm going to break my presentation into two. One, very briefly, I'll actually talk about the networks. But then, I changed a little bit of it last night because I heard a lot of comments and I heard a little bit this morning that this need for capacity, the need for funding, the need. And there's a question I will ask you later, and then I'll switch. So let me not preempt it. So you'll see it in two levels. But I want to push you just a little bit, as you didn't like the name directors of ICT, but whichever names you come up with, for now I'll just use directors of ICT. As Nicholas mentioned, we don't operate in isolation. Not all the regional networks are shown in this map. In Southern America, including Mexico, they're under Red Clara. It's a regional network. The US is a big country. It has its own regional network, Internet 2, Canada, Canary, JISC in the UK, UbuntuNet in the north, Giant is the blue in the middle of Europe. Africa has three. ASREN is the Arab States Regional Education Network. That's what you see in purple, so it's North Africa and the Arab States. West Africa and Central Africa have theirs, but the orange where I'll focus is us, UbuntuNet Alliance for Research and Education Network. So you're not alone. We are a family of networks, and we all operate together through our own shared goals of improving research and education, not just across our countries or across our continent, but literally in this instance, across the entire world. There's our network as of now. It's called Ubuntu Network 3. It's in its third iteration. It's co-funded by the European Union and member NRENs pay into it. Some of the logos you see there are the NRENs that are members and are connected onto the network. The blue points you see there are the singular POPs that we have in each of the countries. Now, the key thing to remember here is UbuntuNet Alliance is owned by the NRENs. It was set up by the NRENs, and I think you heard a little bit of that yesterday, to serve you. So in the same way that RENU serves you by collectively bringing you together, using your economies of scale to provide you with broadband connectivity at a reasonable cost, the same is done at a regional level. By setting up these networks, again, at the same time, we're able to get good quality broadband network at reasonable costs. The biggest impact UbuntuNet has, as of now, it's not so much in Uganda and Kenya and South Africa, because there the market is relatively liberal and relatively stable in terms of connectivity, but it still has an impact. But many of our landlocked countries, Malawi, Zambia, connectivity is still very expensive. And there are only one or two players in the market. Ethiopia, which we have just connected, has only one player. I know Safaricom has just entered, but Safaricom as of now has minimal fiber in the country. So there's only one vendor, Ethiotel. And Ethiotel is a government body as well. So they tell you what the price is, and that's it. But even with Ethiotel, we've managed to be able to negotiate and lower pricing for Ethernet, the NREN in Ethiopia, which will then lower pricing for institutions as well. But as was mentioned yesterday, it's not just pricing. The bandwidth we say we give you is the bandwidth you get. The quality we say we give you is the quality you get. And that is not always the case with an ISP. But I want to switch from networks. I'm coming back to networks, but there's something else I want to ask. How big is the pipe or capacity, I'll keep using pipe, at your university. And you need to reflect on this. And in the next few slides or next few minutes, I want to change your thinking on capacity. As was mentioned before, I was Deputy Vice Chancellor at the University of Nairobi. We used to interact with the Director ICT, the Vice Chancellor, etc. And one of the big challenges you have as a director is if you come and tell the Vice Chancellor, we need more capacity, full stop. The Vice Chancellor doesn't care. I'll be honest. If you just say I need more capacity, so what? Everybody needs more of something. The librarian comes, I need more journals. Students come, we need more hostel rooms. You can't accommodate all of us. Everybody's coming to the Vice Chancellor, I need more of. As one would expect. The Vice Chancellor doesn't have all the resources anybody needs. So it's a question of making sure that your need is prioritized. So how do you sell yourself? Not you the individual, but you the needs of why you need a bigger pipe at your institutions. How can Renu, we talked about how the NRENs at country level help you build these economies of scale so that you can actually get these bigger pipes, better pipes than you can get by yourself as an individual institution. So I put that picture of somebody standing in a pipe because the idea is that you want a really, really big pipe. So that when somebody is working, and I'll give a couple of projects as an illustration, and as was mentioned yesterday, connectivity is not an issue, it is just there. Let me give another example. A campus builds a new building. Nobody ever asks, should I connect electricity to that building? It's a given. But having a campus network in that new building is always not a given. A lot of times you're told, yes, I know it's important. Some of the wiring may be done, not all of it, but it will come later. You want to be in a position that connectivity is just like power, where it is a given. It is a minimum required for any university that is serious, that wants to compete on a global stage has. If you don't have adequate capacity, and I'll repeat it 100 times, if you don't have adequate capacity as an academic institution, you cannot compete on the global stage in 2024. No matter what else you do. Because the way the world has changed, everything runs online in one form or another. And I'm going to give a couple of examples to emphasize this point. Question I want to ask you also, what role do you play in the university? I know you have a title, Director blank, ICT with variations. But I want to ask this is that, are you an advocate of what is possible, or are you simply a manager of what is there? What I mean by that is you have this infrastructure, and therefore you spend all your time managing what is there. And I want to push you to be the first one, to be an advocate of what is possible. Remember, you are the boss of this area. So you have people below you who can worry about managing what is there. My view is your role is to look ahead, to strategize on what is possible in my institution based on the infrastructure that I would like to have, and then supervise those who manage what is there. You have sat for a long time. Kindly may I ask you to stand up? You have sat for a long time. And just mimic what that person has done. Just put your hands up. This is what I have told all my staff always. Think big. This is thinking big. Think big. Can I hear that? Think big. Please have a seat. Dream big. You're not always going to get what you want. But if that dream is not there, of course you wouldn't get it. So that when you go to your vice chancellor, you're not talking about I need more capacity. You're talking about my researchers need to do the following. My lecturers need to do the following. My students need to do the following. And the vice chancellor said, yeah, actually that's a really good idea. I agree fully. And then you add, but to do that, that's when you come in and said, I need more capacity. You flip the conversation around in terms of the connectivity and the capacity that you like. I'm going to run you through 3 quick examples of what I mean, and then come to a conclusion. COVID came, and we all went online. At the University of Nairobi, teaching never stopped. The university decided that we won't stop. It paused for about 2 months. All things went online. Systems were put in place. We had negotiations with telecom companies. We told students, wherever you are, go to your local shop, pick up your SIM card. The names are there. It allows you to access educational resources, no cost to you as a student, no matter where you are in the country. Students were trained, lecturers were trained. We had not used these systems before. And in 2-3 months, we were up and running. COVID ended. I know it has not, but in our context, COVID ended. But teaching online continued for several more months because students did not want to go back to the classroom initially. And the reason was, even if you missed the class, it was recorded. It's a Zoom recording. You can watch it later. It forced the lecturer to put all their content online because they're not physically seeing you. And so they liked it. But then we went back to class. In our department of mechanical engineering, we decided that how do we use the tools and the learning we had during COVID in class to make the learning environment much better than it was before COVID. What I'm showing you there is a tablet. Doesn't matter what the tablet is. Those are actually my notes in 2022-ish. And we're teaching a class. So instead of writing on a whiteboard, during COVID, I was writing on the tablet so students could see it. And we told the students, don't take notes because, don't transcribe what I'm writing. You can take notes on addition, but don't transcribe, which is typical of a classroom. Because after the class is done, remember this is writing on a tablet, you convert it to a PDF and you send it to the students. So everything you have written on the so-called electronic whiteboard, the students have. They no longer need to transcribe. They can listen and pay attention. But now we are back in the classroom. Same tablet, connected to a projector. You lecture as you normally would in class, but when you're done, convert to PDF, load it on the LMS, and the students have it as they would. And now, because the LMS was part and parcel of the institution, you can now do more and more on the LMS. I'll give you one more story. I told my chair I want to do my midterms online. The chair said, absolutely not. Students must physically come. I said, it'll make no difference. In engineering, I always tell my students, even if you came with a textbook into class, I don't care. Because the formulas are very few in engineering. They're very few. Most engineering textbooks are big, but the bulk of it is examples. Solving the problems is not easy. So you can have all the formulas you want. So we have a start time and end time. You log in, the exam opens, and we're using Moodle. At one point in time, do the exam wherever you are. You enter your answers, it closes, and you're told connectivity is not an excuse. If you can't have it wherever you are, come to the university. So you cannot say I didn't have connectivity. And the minute the exam ends, argument's sake, 10:01. At 10:01 and 1 second, the students can see how they did and the answers and where they went wrong. Now, I did that. I went back to the chairman and I said, you see the bell curve, poor students, average students, great students. This was last semester before COVID, face-to-face. The same bell curve. online. The point I'm making with those two stories is you can now leverage these tools that we have. It's not as if these tools are somewhere. We have them. You can leverage them. If you can't host them, Renu can host them. We had that yesterday. So that you significantly improve the teaching and learning experience that you have in your classrooms, using the tools that already exist and you already have right now, as opposed to simply going back to the way we were in 2019, writing on the blackboard and students are transcribing notes. This is an argument you can make to your vice chancellor. I'm trying to make you an advocate and not a manager of what is possible at your institutions. We talked yesterday someone talked about repositories. Many universities don't have repositories. And Renu can host a repository if you don't have the infrastructure. If you don't have a repository in 2024, the bulk of your university's research is invisible. Having a hard copy thesis in the library is completely useless. Why? Even your students, the young ones, the Gen Zs, they don't go to the library. They don't want to read hard things. I have daughters who are 25-year-olds. They don't want to hear paper. Their view is send it to me. They want to read it on their phones, on their laptops, not giving them a book to read. Yeah. Is there e-version when you suggest a book to read? So now, your students have typed their thesis. It's electronic already. They print it, you bind it, you put it in the library. And that is the end of it. The student has theirs on their shelf, the supervisor has theirs on their shelf, there's a copy in the library, the student has graduated, doing whatever they're doing. That research will never ever see the light of day again. It's like it was never done. Its only point was to graduate someone. Meanwhile, there's so much good information on it. How many institutions have repositories? We are friends, so you can be honest. So the rest of you, Renu is here. We were told yesterday they can do it. And by the way, it is very easy to do. It's not difficult. And they'll train you to do it once it is set up. But you can also set up specialized repositories. So for example, I'll just do very quickly. We set up a quick one. It's live now, Africa Archive, 3 months ago. It's not competing with institutional repositories. No, we don't. You must have those. But there are certain areas which cross institutions, cross countries. Where are those documents? So for example, we have just recently set up, during COVID, the NRF South Africa got a lot of funding, international funding, and gave grants across Africa to be able to do quick research to address COVID in Africa. And therefore, we had a discussion with them, can we set up a repository for you so that all these African researchers can deposit their research output in one place? So that if you want to know what research was done for COVID in this period, you don't have to go to every single institution's repository. They are there, but you can also go to one place. And then we also give you DOIs and all that as well. Now, this is at continental level. I'm sure there are many specialized repositories you can set up at national level. Things which are not tied to a single institution, but are relevant to the country as a whole. Because then one would argue, where would that repository reside? Of course, Reno would be a natural place for it to reside. I hope I'm spurring your thinking on what you can do. And these tools, as we said yesterday, are already there. Now, this is some research work a group of us did literally 21 years ago. The internet was at its infancy in terms of the way we know it. And the argument we made was this. There were many exceedingly expensive undergraduate laboratories where many universities, and this was in the US, could not afford to have them. And they were all computer controlled at that point in time. So our argument was simple. If a student is sitting at a computer, the equipment is in front of them, and they're controlling that computer can be anywhere. It doesn't have to be in that university. And the question therefore is, how can you virtually run physical labs, not simulated labs? And we did some experiments at Rutgers University when I was there to show that the level of education between students who did it virtually and students who did it physically, even though they're still on the same computers, if you look at over several semesters, it's exactly the same. No difference in terms of losing learning quality. This is a very common approach with the tools we have today, especially for research institutions that have specialized labs and researchers from different universities access them. I raise this here because lack of physical labs in Africa is a massive problem. Where you have an engineering department at the University of Nairobi, relatively good labs. You have another engineering department in the same country, and the labs are poor. Poor in the sense that a lot of the high-end equipment is not there. But both these students at the two universities are supposed to get the same education. But they don't. And it begs the question, why can't you share information? Those who have the labs, they all run on computers anyway, can share with universities who don't, who will run the labs virtually, and you come to some arrangement on how you pay me for using my lab. Still much cheaper than building a whole new lab myself. Very common around the world now. I am yet to see a single instance on the continent. Doesn't mean I know everything, but I've been searching and haven't found it yet. Why? This was 2003. We're in 2024. The tools are infinitely better. Most of these tools are now plug and play, no-brainers, as opposed to then when a lot of it had to be coded. So again, I ask you as directors, why? Why can't we leverage what we have to be able to do a lot more at our institutions than we are doing now, and therefore raise the standard of teaching and learning? I want to give you one more example. This is an interesting one because a lot of those have been science. Just to give an example that this applies to all disciplines. So I'm switching to history. And I like this example because it ties to Uganda. I was looking for something I can tie back to Uganda. Game is a constituency right across the border in Luo land. That is where I'm from. That is my home village. Literally across the border. Then, in the 1910s, there was a chief called Odera Kamo. And this was a British appointed, a colonial appointed chief, not a traditional chief, right? It's a colonial appointed chief, the 1910s. And there's a project called Rediscovering Our Visual History, which is simply, we have a lot of write-ups about our people in the early days, but we have no images of them or what they look like. Now, this sketch of Odera Kango has been accepted, was done, and that is him. But no one can find a picture of him. But why do we care about this person called Odera Kango? And how does it relate to where we are here in Kampala? In 1915, the Reverend J.J. Willis was the Archbishop, actually, in Uganda, and invited a couple of Western Kenya chiefs to look at how education had been set up by Church Mission Society and other religious organizations in Uganda. They went to King's College, Budo. They went to a couple of other institutions. They paid a visit to the Kabaka, if my memory serves me right, was very young. was about 17, if my memory serves me right. I could be slightly off. But when Odera Kango came back after that visit, he said, my people must also get this education. Now what is interesting is, he returned up and put up many schools with support of the colonial government. Any parent who didn't take their child to school where a school exists was publicly caned. Because his argument was, why is your child not in school? It doesn't cost you anything. Fast forward to 2024, Game constituency, where I'm from, has the highest density of professors in the Republic of Kenya. Me being one of them. Yeah? All the way back to a colonial chief who made education. There's so many primary and secondary schools in that constituency. You have no excuse for no education. So why do we care? How does this relate to you? For decades, literally, historians have been trying to find a picture, a photograph of this chief who died in 1917. Was killed by the same colonial government killed him in 1917. Last couple of years, my dad, who's also a professor but he's a professor of history. This is where the history comes in. Have embarked on a project because I convinced him that there are so many photographs taken by various people, explorers, postcards, you name it. Even Winston Churchill came through Kisumu to Uganda. His book, My African Journey, has so many photographs. If he was a chief then and was a colonial appointed chief, one of these pictures must have him, since we have a drawing. So the last few years, we've been going through literally thousands, no exaggeration, of photographs from hundreds of online sources. Read internet capacity. You couldn't do that if you didn't have internet capacity. Right? This was done mainly at University of Nairobi. We have capacity. So you can go somewhere, you find a collection, somebody has 200 pictures, they tell you it's 1.2 gigabits, you don't care, you just press download. You don't even think about it. In a few minutes, done. You start analyzing. Can your students and staff do that? And I'm giving you a local context. It's the University of Nairobi. We're not talking a university in Europe. Can your university do that? It enables historians, who we normally assume are not technical, to be able to leverage on technology to do their work. Now, where did this reach? We found a candidate. This is a postcard. Right? If you look online, you'll find various sites that talk about old East African postcards. And you can look, even Uganda has a whole set. So these are the Kenya ones. And then you go to Kavirondo, which was what the Gulf was called. All these hundreds of pictures. So we went through and we're like, this is a candidate, as were many candidates. So we took the picture, and slowly over time, just to save time, you reduce the transparency on the image as they're superimposed. And as you go, especially when you look at 60%, 40%, you can see that that drawing directly corresponds to the photograph. Of course, there'll be some minor variations because one's a hand drawing, it's not perfect. So, what people have been taking decades and have failed, we're able to do in a couple of years because technology exists. This is history. It's not science. It's not engineering. It's for historians. None of this is possible if you don't have capacity. And that's the issue I'm talking about of the stories you can tell. So you need to leverage on new technologies to support research. Requires internet capacity. It is not a luxury, is the point I'm trying to make. It is a bare minimum in the day and age that we operate for our institutions. And therefore, the question I have for you, ask it again, ask the beginning. How big is your pipe? If it is very small, your researchers and students and lecturers cannot do any of the things I've just indicated. How big is your pipe? So this should not be your starting point to your vice chancellor. This should be the end point after you've explained things your researchers want to do. But to do it, they require a bigger pipe. How can RENU help you? You're not alone. The way RENU can help you as universities is the way we help each other. Kenneth is here, Tanet is here, Surf is here from the Netherlands. NRENs also help each other. And I showed you the global map, re-emphasizing you're not alone. So how can RENU help you to get more capacity? How can you be a better advocate about what is possible? We're ending with the questions we started with. But I wanted to give you some examples in between to show what I mean on how you can be a better advocate for what is possible. And then concluding, are you making the correct case for more funding? Because more capacity requires more funding. Are you making the correct case? I argue with no knowledge, but just based on other experiences, that you're probably not making the correct case to justify more funding to be able to give you a bigger pipe. And to conclude here with a comment which came right after COVID that I really like, and it's challenging all of us, but we are now operating in a more complex, inclusive, nuanced view of the university, incorporating multiple factors, including pedagogies, which is how we teach, platforms is all the technical stuff that you people manage, the context within which we operate now. The young people learn very differently than we went to school. Are you accommodating their context? The practices, the research I've just shown you for history, you can now do things with technology that were not thought historians could do before. The practices are also changing. All these need to be synthesized together because you're in one university. How do you synthesize all these together if we're to shape a new teaching and learning journey in a post-COVID environment? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. I think it was good that I didn't share your bio earlier, your full bio. It would have biased people, but I think now they've enjoyed a whole wealth of experience and a wide scope of coverage from history to labs to repositories. So now when I tell them that in your younger days you were one of the most brilliant students in mechanical engineering, they might not believe. But if I had said that at the beginning, they probably would have wanted to listen to only mechanical engineering. So Prof in his student days was one of the most brilliant students in mechanical engineering. And his profile, you can see it on the website and many other pages. But now we are thinking beyond that. We are thinking of how can we serve our community as best as we can. He has shared his perspective. He has been part of the leadership of many universities in Kenya and most importantly, the University of Nairobi. So he knows what it means from the leadership position when you guys as ICT directors go to them, and not at our scale. I don't think many universities here in Uganda compare to the University of Nairobi. So he knows what's possible. He knows the challenges of our settings as you try to scale up. And I think he has brought it out very well. Are we advocates of what's possible or managers of what is there? From what I see, I think most of us are just managers of what is there. We need to stretch our imagination. And Prof, also thank you for the history lessons. I think now I can see you're deeply attached to Uganda in many ways. You should remain Ugandan. And the school you gave as an example, I think some people here went to that school. I see they are nodding. So, so thank you so much. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Professor, for that very lively talk. We learned quite a lot. Just wanted to also add that when it comes to managing what's possible, and I totally agree with you, Professor, in terms of dreaming big, and the directors in here being salespeople for the networks and the internet so that they can get more capacity. and I pray they do that, and that happens. However, there is also the question of how do we make the best use of what we have at the moment as we are selling? Because some of the universities here, for example, they have budgets that maybe take a year to be reviewed, and you may find that if they're able to convince the vice chancellors, that may come maybe in next year's budget or the year after, depending on how the resources are. As you mentioned, there are very many competing priorities. So I just wanted to take a look back at the session we had about the campus network as a service. And there are very many issues that these campus networks are grappling with. One of them was mentioned by Patience, which is bandwidth utilization, where most of them are at their maximum. And I was just wondering, since, okay, I'm assuming that there's some spare capacity with EduRoam, sorry, with the network for Reno as an NREN, and since they have a product, EduRoam, and Reno is for the institutions, can there be some kind of negotiation where the university hostels, for example, where these EduRoam hotspots are, can provide a bit of their spare capacity that Reno has, so that the students at these hostels can enjoy these benefits? And in terms of managing what is already there, putting in place some bandwidth optimization systems so that the capacity that is there is used mostly for educational purposes. Because at times the bandwidth may be maximized, but being used for things that are maybe not educational. If there's a way of prioritizing research and educational materials so that that gets prioritized over other traffic that is not in that classification, I think that will also help the universities to sell this to the people in this room, to sell the dreams to the vice chancellors and so forth. And it will also sell Renu and its products to the institution if they are also seeing the tangible benefits of being with Renu. Because many people here were apprehensive about using EduRoam because of the strain it may put on the resources. And there was some advice of, for example, segregating the networks. However, if it is still limited, if there can be some bandwidth provided from the spare capacity Renu has, that could be another way of sweetening the deal, so to speak, so that universities can have more bandwidth. Thank you.
Prof, maybe before you come in on that, I think the discussion on how to sell, how the ICT directors can sell value to the leadership teams. I wanted to comment on one of the points you mentioned of repositories. Actually, when you asked, the audience was honest. The people that put up their hands were 4, and those are the only institutions that we see with active repositories, which presents an opportunity for us and for them as well. Why this is important, I think in listening to you in other audiences, you've mentioned before that one of the reasons why the University of Nairobi was able to progress was after they digitized the repositories and the entire experience. So most of your universities are lacking on digital repositories, and yet it's basic stuff that we can do, that we can support you to do. So that's one way to sell value, and I hope we can pick it up right away. Now you can attack the question from, I didn't get your name again, but yeah, you can attack it.
Okay, thanks. Actually, a lot of it was for you, but I just capture a little part of it. There's always this issue of our students using the network, well, let's say students and staff, because staff also do non-educational things on the network, for the right purpose. And one would argue that it starts becoming a challenge if you want to segregate what a student can or cannot do, because then you're defining what is educational and what is not. For example, for me, YouTube is my best teacher. There are many things I need to do on my laptop, or I download a software. I have no idea how to use them, but I hear it can do this. I don't ask somebody first. I go to YouTube first, because somebody will have a tutorial somewhere in the world in English. And invariably, you do find a tutorial, you go through it, you do what you have to do. On the same YouTube, I watch music videos. Now, how will you distinguish between when I'm watching videos on YouTube or when I'm doing a tutorial? So it becomes a challenge to be able to segregate. Many organizations engage their audiences on Facebook, for example. But at the same time, we use Facebook, or those who use it, for social means, and students love Facebook. Again, how do you distinguish? So I'm just trying to say that many universities, even University of Nairobi, had toyed with that for the longest time, but then it was not practical of a way to do it. And so the understanding is simply that they will use it for other purposes, and therefore you try to just maximize, knowing that that is going to happen. But again, others may have found a solution, but as far as I'm aware, it has been very difficult to sort of isolate what somebody can or cannot do without negatively impacting what they use it for educational research.
Thank you, Prof. And I think that speaks to the need for bigger pipes, as big as they can be. But on the EduRoam staff, the point is noted, and we can engage more to see how we can help you more. Going back a bit on repositories, actually, I've remembered that one of the institutions that has been aggressive on repositories here is Busitema University. It's one of the newer universities, but they came to us to help them digitize that entire experience and on how to publish them online. So there is competition among the universities, whether you like it or not. So after we had worked with them for about 6 months, they then came back to us with, I think the site they use for ranking, I forget the name, the site that usually publishes university rankings. And all of a sudden, this new university was ranked ahead of most of the old universities. And it was only because of just optimizing the digital processes, repos, publishing, all their stuff. So please don't sit back with that issue. Like Prof mentioned, if your content is digital, it's useless. If it's not digital, it's useless. Don't continue putting student records in hard copy. We can help you to set up those digital repositories, and it will improve the value proposition you have for the leadership teams, because the results are quick to show. Busitema has walked the journey with us, and many of you can walk the journey with us.
Sorry, if allow me, let me just touch on one comment you made on student records. Before COVID, if you came to the University of Nairobi and asked us, how many students do you have? It didn't matter who you asked, from the vice chancellor downwards. You'll always get, we have roughly, we have approximately. Nobody knew how many students you have. It sounds strange. Nobody knew. Why? It's a very large university. All student records are manual and had been decentralized. So you go and register at your faculty. So your faculty has some numbers, then you add them up, then you add them again, the two numbers don't correspond. Impossible to do proper planning. COVID again forced digitization. Now everything is online. So you can know not only how many students do you have, you can know how many students are in each faculty, each department, what level, simply by logging in. Makes a huge difference. And you eliminate big rooms of paper files of student records, because now everything is online.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Colleagues, more questions, but maybe just to reorient the discussion. This morning, we are discussing things, actually the whole of today, we're discussing things beyond the conventional internet access. And you'll notice that Prof has not said much about the regional network, because we are looking at services that will add value to your proposition to the leadership teams.
Thank you. I'm Jackton Brian Wafula from Livingstone International University. Thank you, Professor. I think my pipe is completely small, and you have given me a way forward. But in terms of academics, when I did my master's, they requested me to print 6 books after, and then each copy was at around 30,000 Ugandan shillings. So Professor, on the side of discussion on how the academic side can eliminate that, I see RENU can help us with the repository kind of thing. But now how do we initiate this kind of talk to the academic department so that we are avoiding this kind of costs and this kind of printing, this kind of books? Because if I'm spending 30,000, printing 6 books, submitting them, and that is a cost after you've done your proposals, you have submitted them, they're back, you have done your abstract. So this kind of thing, they are completely costly to the students, and also paperwork, which you are trying to eliminate. I would request if you can help us to understand how we can convince these academic sections, and especially when we talk about the academic registrars, the vice chancellors, especially to people who are dealing with research. Thank you so much, but my pipe completely is very small. Asante sana.
Okay, thanks. You need to change of mindset when it comes to how things were done and how things can be done. That is why you'll find some universities in Kenya, sorry, I'm talking about Kenya local, that's the context I'm familiar with. They do have a repository. They will put your thesis in the repository, but they'll still tell you bring 6 printed bound copies, because they must, in their view, physically sign them and then keep physical copies in the library. So it's changing mindset. You may have seen this. There's nothing annoys me more than you're in a meeting and you talk about something, let's do this, let's do that, and somebody puts up their hand and says, no, we shouldn't, because it has always been done this way. The minute you say that means you're stuck, right? And as the point you have raised, many of our registrars, academic, are stuck because it has always been done this way. That's a hard culture change. But again, as directors ICT, working with the librarians, with the custodians of these documents and repositories, that is what you should constantly push without tiring to get that change done.
Thank you, Prof. Maybe you should have noted that the name Wafula here probably comes from your constituents, because they spill over across the border. So I think he got touched when you spoke. But I don't know, I beg your pardon? He's your neighbor. But I don't know if your side of Uganda also has the same density of professors. How many here went to King's College Budo, the school that inspired the professors in Kenya? Eh? Okay. All right, the next question. Yes, Grace.
Thank you very much, Nicholas and Prof. I'm not sure if this is the best session to ask this question, but I ask this question almost every forum, every chance I have to meet here. Now, I'm a strong advocate of services that ride on networks. I also understand that university management love to look at the cost of services, and RENU offers a wonderful way of offering these services at cost-effective ways. But there's something that that I mention every time. I've been trying to increase my pipe at the university where I work for the last, I mean, every financial year I try to increase the pipe, and I've found a restriction which I've shared with RENU. I don't know if we could think again about it. Now, these are the pricing models. Between 80 and 300, 300 and 1,000, 1,000, 2,500, and above 2,500. It is almost impossible for many of our institutions to have a jump from 80 to over 300 to enjoy a price reduction. Almost impossible. At my university, we do 150 meg, and I've been trying to scale up such that I enjoy better pricing, but also give a better service to the professors and to the various, stakeholders.
but then I can't afford triple such that I can enjoy. When I presented it to management, they said, how can you explain us doing triple? I mean, make it make sense. And yet, even last year, we increased. I mean, can we think of a pricing model where, the gap between the tiers, the different tiers, is manageable enough, easier to chew for some of us, the smaller institutions, as opposed to the big institutions in the country?
Thank you, Grace.
I'll pass that to you.
Yeah, this is absolutely the right forum for it, and we made sure that we bring our business development team, the end user engagement team, and the finance team. So they've all had, and definitely they're going to pick it up and see how to get pricing. And it's not coming from only you. I think during the break, one of the other smaller universities told me that it seems our pricing plan is for only big institutions. That's not okay. And it's good that it's coming out here, because RENU is not designed to serve only the institutions that are big. RENU is designed to serve all the institutions across the country. So thank you for the question, and the team will pick it up. And within the next couple of months, we should have a new pricing plan that caters for everyone. And maybe more flexibility. So some of these pricing plans came from maybe 5-10 years ago, but things, I guess, have changed, and we should do something. But that said, Grace, one of the institutions that has had a remarkable journey on upgrading, I think I hinted on them yesterday. I don't know if Jones is around. So when we went to Kavala University in 2014, they had only 5 meg. Now they have 500 meg, yet they're public university and smaller than some other public universities that are taking like 200 or 100 meg. So I don't know how Jones is doing it. So maybe in the breaks, some of you could engage with Jones, because this university is smaller than many of your universities, but he's been able to grow 100 times in 10 years. At least the public universities could learn from him. The private ones, we are definitely going to come up with packages for you. So colleagues, it's been a pleasure listening to the keynote from Professor Madara. I don't think we should engage him more at the stage, maybe during the breaks. Thank you for being very patient with us, Prof. He's been with us from yesterday to today, and I like that he has, much as he's serving 25 countries in the region with connectivity, he has actually chosen to speak about things that can add value as you build your case to the leadership of the universities. And he has spoken from his experience when he was leading one of the biggest universities in the region. Thank you so much, Prof.